Hello and welcome everyone to my unit analysis video on Hormagaunts. In this video I'll go over in detail the stat lines for the Hormagaunts, the synergies within the detachments, synergies with other Tyranid units, and synergies with different army strategies. Let's take a look at the datasheet for the Hormagaunts. Movement is 10 inches, which is misleading because of their ability Bounding Leap. This allows you to charge after an advance. So their movement is really d6 plus 10. With most deployment types, the no man's land is 24 inches, so you're able to get about halfway through it in one move. Then if you have an opponent to charge, you could easily get into engagement range with enemy units turn 1, especially if your opponent went first and has units in no man's land. The Hormagaunts have a great movement stat, which is the main draw of using them. Their toughness is 3. That's a horrible toughness, but it's in line with the other Tyranid battle line units, and since you can have 20 of these on a team, the low toughness makes sense. So this unit is going to be easy to wound with strength 6 or higher weapons. They have a 5+ save throw. It's another mediocre stat, but it's the same as the Hormagaunts. Any weapons with AP-2 are really going to shred through them, so you want to watch out for that, especially if the AP-2 weapon has a lot of shots. They have a wound characteristic of 1, which makes sense for a unit that could be 20 models. Their leadership is an 8+. 8 is worse than average on 2 dice, however the Tyranid Synapse ability allows you to roll 3 dice instead of the typical 2. So you want to try and have this unit be in Synapse range. The problem with that is they are likely to be far ahead of the rest of your army, so they're unlikely to be in Synapse range. I find that the bad leadership stat is surprisingly annoying with the Endless Multitude units, since you're usually needing to use the Endless Swarm stratagem, and them being Battle Shock doesn't allow you to use that ability. The objective control is 2. That is great, especially for a 20 model squad. If you can somehow fit all 20 on the objective, that's an OC of 40. This makes them great for harassing opponents' units on objectives to keep them from scoring points. Now let's look at their weapon profile. All they have for weapons is 1 melee attack, which with their crazy high movement ends up not being much of a hindrance. Hormagaunt Talons have 3 attacks, which times 20 is 60 attacks, so make sure you have plenty of dice. The weapon skill is 4+, so about half the attacks will hit. The strength is only 3, so you're probably wounding on a 5+ or 6s, since there aren't many toughness 3 models. The armor penetration is -1, so that slightly makes up for the bad strength characteristic. Damage is 1, which is to be expected since they already get 3 attacks. So there's a bit of synergy with the hyper aggression adaptation from the Invasion Fleet detachment, since you get lethal hits against monsters and vehicles, and lethal hits allows you to bypass the Hormagaunts' bad wound rolls. Hormagaunts have the Synapse faction ability that all Tyranids have, which just allows them to take advantage of Synapse. Note, this doesn't mean it has Synapse. A Synapse creature has that ability in the keywords section, not the ability section. I just wanted to clarify that, because I was confused by that when I first started playing Tyranids. Bounding Leap I already went over, basically gives d6 to your movement. You can run a squad of 10 or 20 models in a unit. It's actually a tough decision choosing which squad size to run. It just depends on if going wide is better against your opponent's army, or if making your squads more resilient is better. You also must consider if you need to go wider to score secondaries. I'd usually go 20 models in a unit, just to make up for their poor defense. The keywords are Infantry, Battle Line, Great Devourer, Endless Multitude, and Hormagaunts. The 2 important keywords are Battle Line and Endless Multitude. Battle Line means you can take up to 6 units in an army. So 6 times 20 is 120. Yeah, that doesn't seem fun to paint 120 Hormagaunt models, but that's a struggle of playing a Horde army. Endless Multitude allows you to take advantage of a couple key synergies within the detachments. 65 points for 1 unit of 10, or 130 points for 1 unit of 20. 130 times 6 is 780 points if you want to max out on Hormagaunts in your army, which is something you might want to do if you're playing an unending swarm detachment. The Invasion Fleet Detachment rule is Hyper Adaptations, which allows you to take one of 3 army-wide buffs. The first one is Swarming Instincts, which gives your army sustained hits 1 against infantry and swarm units. The second one is Hyper Aggression, which gives your army lethal hits against monster and vehicle units. And the third one is Hive Predators, which gives your army the precision ability on critical hits against a character unit. All 3 of these are fantastic with the Hormagaunts, since they all activate on the attack roll, which they get 3 of per model, which greatly increases the chances of you getting 6s. Like I said earlier, I especially like the Hyper Aggression Hyper Adaptation, since lethal hits bypass the Hormagaunts' bad wound rolls, and allows them to be somewhat of a threat to monster and vehicle units with high toughness. Rapid Regeneration is great for any model that doesn't already have the Feel No Pain ability. However, like I mentioned earlier, this unit's going to have a hard time staying in Synapse range, so you'll usually only get the 6+ Feel No Pain, which isn't very exciting. I try to use this stratagem only if I can get the 5+ Feel No Pain, since that is so much better. Adrenal Surge works really well with the Hormagaunts. This makes a hit roll of 5+ a critical in the fight phase. This means you're triggering the Hyper Adaptations ability double the number of times. All of a sudden you're going to be doing some real damage to units that you shouldn't be able to do much to. The main issue with this is the 2 CP cost. However, it's a battle tactics stratagem, meaning the Hive Tyrants can use the Will of the Hive Mind ability. Will of the Hive Mind has a 12-inch range, so there's a decent chance of the Hormagaunts being in range of it. The Winged Hive Tyrant has a 12-inch movement, so he'll likely be able to keep up with the Hormagaunts, both giving them the ability and possibly Synapse. Death Frenzy can work well if you know that a ton of your units are going to die this fight phase, so you can do some damage back. It's definitely a solid but situational stratagem. Overrun is incredibly situational, but it's nice to have in the very specific situation when it comes up, when you need just those couple extra inches to reach the objective. Predatory Imperative lets you choose a different hyper adaptation for a turn, which can be useful if there's a unit you need to do some damage to that's not the unit type you chose for the hyper adaptation at the beginning of the game. Endless Swarm is made for this unit. For 1 CP you can return up to D3+3 models to an Endless Multitude unit. This stratagem can make your Hormagaunts surprisingly resilient if your opponent isn't able to wipe out the unit. You'll likely be using this stratagem every chance you get, so don't be afraid to lose models in this unit to push into your opponent's army. This detachment is a perfect fit for the Hormagaunts. It even seems like most of the stratagems are designed specifically to take advantage of the Hormagaunts. If I was playing this detachment, I'd highly recommend running at least 1 unit of Hormagaunts, probably even more. I wouldn't recommend using Hormagaunts in this detachment, since it's all about Tyranid monster units. Maybe if you're desperate for a unit that can do objectives, but I think the Termagants and Gargoyles are better at that, since they have shooting, so they can do something while camping on the objective. This detachment rule seems to be specifically designed for Hormagaunts. Basically, whenever the unit gets shot at, if you lost models, you can move D6 inches towards the nearest enemy unit. This makes it even easier for the Hormagaunts to get in engagement range. Honestly, it's almost overkill compared with the Hormagaunts' crazy movement. The Surge move allows you to get in engagement range, meaning if your opponent doesn't shoot with their units properly, you could get in engagement range and prevent them from shooting at your Hormagaunts, and you can tie up an enemy unit in melee that they weren't expecting to be in melee with. I'd be tempted to run the max amount of Hormagaunts. That way you can take advantage of the detachment rule that works perfectly with them. Synaptic Goading allows you to reroll your D6 on a Surge move, and it allows you to target the nearest objective instead of the nearest enemy unit, which is obviously beneficial in the situations where it comes up. Unending Waves can replenish a Hormagaunt unit when it's destroyed, so for this detachment I recommend running units of 20 Hormagaunts to get the most value out of this. This stratagem is 2 CP, so it's not quite as spammable as Endless Swarm, but it is a stratagem that you'll probably be using whenever you can. When playing this detachment, I'd recommend always having 2 CP up in your opponent's turn, so you always have the option of using this stratagem. Teaming masses makes it harder for an endless multitude unit to get hit. This makes it a solid defensive stratagem to spam, especially with the Hive Tyrant's Will of the Hive Mind ability. Swarming Mass gives sustained hits 1 to one of your endless multitude units, and makes a 5+ hit roll a crit. This is a battle tactics stratagem, so it's something decent to spam with Will of the Hive Mind for when you think you need a bit extra damage with this unit. Bounding Advance makes it so the Hormagaunts are really going to cover some ground. This is another battle tactics stratagem, and a perfect one to use turn 1 to get a unit of Hormagaunts to just about anywhere you want on no man's land. Preservation Imperative basically negates Blast. This is obviously good at shoring up a huge weakness in this type of horde strategy. This detachment is another perfect fit for Hormagaunts. It's designed for endless multitude units, but the Hormagaunts seem to benefit the most from it, allowing you to move across the board constantly and get in engagement range with your opponent's units very easily. I'd probably want to run the full 60 20-man squads of Hormagaunts for this detachment. Feed the Swarm allows your Harvester units to regenerate other Tyranid units. Importantly, endless multitude units get 3 models back instead of just the one that the basic infantry would get back. This detachment rule is great for when you're within range of a Harvester unit. Unfortunately, it suffers from the same problem as Synapse, since your Hormagaunts are rarely going to be sitting next to friendly objectives, and falling back just to regenerate a couple models isn't worth it. I think the Termagants are a better endless multitude unit for this detachment rule. There's an argument for having Hormagaunts in this detachment, but I'd prioritize using Vanguard Invader units. I'd only recommend using them if for some reason you're in desperate need of a unit to do secondaries or objectives. However, the Vanguard Invader should have that covered. The Gargoyles would be a better pick as an objective scorer unit, since they are Vanguard Invaders. This detachment has no synergies with endless multitude units. It really needs your units to stay in Synapse range, and it's going to be difficult with Hormagaunts. If you want an objective infantry unit, I'd recommend the other endless multitude units instead. Heck, even the Neurogaunts might be better since they help with Synapse so much. But too bad they hit like wet noodles in combat. Hormagaunts are a staple of the Tyranid faction. They are a perfect choice for an army that needs a hyper-aggressive melee unit with a good objective control stat. The Invasion Fleet and Unending Swarm detachments are perfect for them, although it could be reasonable to throw them in other detachments just to fill their niche. This is my first Warhammer 40k unit analysis video, so I'd really appreciate any advice to improve the quality of my videos. I'm hoping that this video is in depth enough so now you know everything about the unit. I know it helped me to understand the unit a bit more. Anyways, I want to thank you for watching. I'd appreciate it if you liked the video, comment, and subscribe.